Welcome, dear listeners, wherever in the world you may be. Tonight, a woman will guide us through her story, a tale whispered from within the imperial palace of ancient China. From her eyes, you will see the splendor of Chang'an, the secrets of the Tang court, and the rise and fall of the most radiant beauty of her age. Let her voice carry you across time into a world of silk and moonlight. I stand at the threshold of my old life in the pale blue dawn, a simple bundle of belongings at my feet. The air is cool and filled with the faint scent of dew on spring grass. Behind me, my mother's eyes glisten with tears she tries not to shed. Father stands stiffly, already turning away to hide his sorrow. I draw a slow breath, memorizing the cracks in the wooden gate of my childhood home, the cherry blossom tree leaning over our roof, the sound of my little brother's footsteps on the stone path. With a final bow to my parents, I step into the waiting carriage, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, and leave the only world I have ever known. The journey to Chang'an begins in silence. As the horses pull our carriage forward, I peek out through the silk curtain at the awakening horizon. Fields of yellow rapeseed flowers blur by, their sweet fragrance drifting in, mingling with the dust of the road. Villages and rivers pass like fading lantern lights at dusk. Each mile carries me further from the girl I was and closer to an uncertain destiny. At night, under strange inn roofs or beneath a canopy of stars, I clutch a small embroidered handkerchief my mother gave me, a spray of peonies stitched in pink silk, and whisper prayers to the endless sky. Days and nights merge in a dream of creaking wheels, singing crickets, and my own anxious heartbeat. On the fifth day, just after sunrise, I first glimpse the walls of Chang'an. They rise out of the morning mist like the ramparts of a heavenly kingdom, stretching wide across the plain. My breath catches at the sight. Towering fortifications of dark earth and stone, crowned with formidable gatehouses. Even from afar, I can see banners fluttering atop them, tiny colored specks that must be enormous flags in truth. As we draw closer, the immense south gate looms above us, its mighty vermilion doors thrown open to swallow travelers into the city. The clamor of the capital greets me at once. A cacophony of voices, cartwheels, donkey brays, and hawkers crying their wares. The air is thick with unfamiliar scents, spiced meat grilling on charcoal braziers, incense from roadside shrines, the sweat and perfume of tens of thousands of souls. I feel my world tilt and expand. Never have I imagined so many people in one place, such grand avenues and endless rows of tiled rooftops. We proceed along a wide boulevard, straight as an arrow, paved with flagstones that gleam where the sunlight catches them. I lift the curtain a little higher, curiosity overcoming my shyness. On either side of the avenue are imposing timber buildings with curved roofs, held aloft by red lacquered pillars. Golden fish-scale tiles cover their eaves, and charms in the shape of small bells hang from the corners, tinkling softly in the breeze. I catch glimpses of a vibrant multitude. Monks in saffron robes pacing serenely, merchants from distant lands with robes of Persian silk, officials in dark brocade riding on horseback, and children chasing one another past market stalls. The city is alive in all directions, a grand maze of walled wards and bustling marketplaces. My heart flutters with excitement and trepidation at the thought that I am in the very heart of the great Tang Empire, in Chang'an, the illustrious city of eternal peace. Once only a faraway name murmured in bedtime stories, it is now astonishingly real and overwhelming around me. Soon the carriage slows as we approach the imperial city at the north end of Chang'an, where the emperor's palaces lie. I feel a flutter of nerves. Beyond these next walls lies the dragon throne itself, the seat of the Son of Heaven, and the new world I must navigate. The outer palace walls stand even taller than the city's, gleaming with white plaster under the midday sun. Each massive gate is guarded by rows of imperial soldiers in polished armor, their halberds crossed, faces impassive as bronze masks. We halt before an ornate entrance known as the Vermilion Phoenix Gate. I crane my neck to see its towering double doors, painted a rich red and studded with golden rivets, each the size of my fist. Stone killin and lions flank the doorway, mythical sentinels promising protection and warning all who enter to leave petty fears behind. A tremor goes through me as the gates groan open and our carriage is allowed to pass over the threshold. It is said that once you cross this point, you leave your old self behind. I bow my head and fold my hands tightly in my lap, as if in prayer. Indeed, I pray silently that I will be safe and worthy in this place of wonders and potential dangers. Inside the palace grounds, the clamor of the city falls away, replaced by a profound hush. The wide boulevard gives way to neat pathways of crushed white stone, flanked by ancient cypress trees and blooming magnolias. I am helped out of the carriage by an attendant, and together our small party proceeds on foot under the canopy of trees. My legs are stiff from travel, but awe propels me forward. Ahead, I spy rooftops upon rooftops, palaces within palaces, each roof crowned with upturned eaves that resemble the spread wings of some giant celestial bird. Small bronze wind bells dangle from those eaves, and their faint chiming carries on the breeze. The effect is ethereal, as if the very air in this place is whispering a gentle welcome. For a moment I wonder if I have stepped not into the human world at all, but into the fabled realm of the immortals from my childhood tales. So enchanting and unreal is the scene around me. We pass through one immense courtyard and then another. In the first, I see a grand audience hall elevated on a platform of pale marble, its broad steps guarded by balustrades shaped like coiling dragons. This must be one of the emperor's great halls, perhaps where he meets officials or holds courtly ceremonies. Though empty at this twilight hour, the vast plaza before it seems to hum with an invisible energy, as if echoing the footsteps of all who have bowed here through the ages. I walk softly, almost on tiptoe, feeling as though we tread on sacred ground. Servants in green and gold livery glide past us with lowered eyes, carrying scrolls, lanterns, and bronze incense burners. None raise their voices above a whisper. I breathe in the aromatic curl of sandalwood smoke that drifts from the incense braziers lining the colonnades. Slanting rays of late-day sun filter between the pillars, illuminating specks of dust that swirl like tiny galaxies in the golden light. Further inward, after passing through a round moon gate, we enter a secluded garden courtyard alive with the murmur of water. At the center lies a small pond fringed by willows and lotus blossoms. A group of women in elegant dress stands by the water's edge, like an enchanted vision come to life. They are concubines, I realize. Palace ladies whom I will soon join in rank. My escort pauses to allow them right of way, and I lower my gaze politely, though not before stealing a quick look. They move with effortless grace, clad in flowing silks of every hue. One wears a robe of light jade green embroidered with cranes, another a deep crimson gown patterned with peonies, others in sunset orange and midnight blue. Their hair is arranged in elaborate coils and topknots adorned with glittering hairpins of gold and jade. I spot tiny ornaments shaped like phoenixes, flowers, and butterflies catching the last light of day. A few of the women carry instruments. One cradles a pipa lute of polished wood, another holds slender bamboo flutes. As they drift past, I hear soft laughter and the hushed rustle of silk slippers on stone. A girl in a pale violet dress plucks a string of her lute idly, and the brief note hangs in the air like a petal caught on the breeze. A delicate fragrance of jasmine and plum blossoms trails behind them after they disappear around a corridor. I realize I've been holding my breath. These women seem like creatures from a painting or fairy maidens from a legend, trained to be beautiful in every movement. In that moment, I feel as small and plain as a sparrow among peacocks. Dust from the road still clings to my travel-worn robe. Will I ever become as polished and confident as they are? Or will I remain a wildflower in this manicured imperial garden, easily overlooked among such exquisite blooms? The eunuch at the head of our little procession, a thin, sharp-eyed man in embroidered silk, clears his throat softly to recapture my attention. He introduces himself as Master Lin, a chamberlain of the inner court, and in a courteous, practiced tone begins to explain my place here and the rules I must obey. I struggle to focus on his words about protocols and duties, when to present myself for the Empress's morning greetings, how to address the senior consorts, which corridors are forbidden without permission. But my attention keeps drifting to the wonders around me. We walk along a covered walkway where vermilion columns support a roof of carved cedar and painted beams. Under our feet, the floor tiles are glazed a deep jade green and feel cool through the thin soles of my shoes. As Master Lin talks, a pair of maidservants scurry by carrying armfuls of fresh bedding and bolts of silk, likely preparing chambers for new arrivals like me or for some impending banquet. The word banquet jars me. Rumors swirled even in my distant province that the emperor holds splendid feasts and entertainments in these halls. Will there be a banquet tonight? Will I catch a glimpse of him there, the sovereign of this realm? The thought sends a quick thrill and pang of panic through me. I have not yet seen the emperor's face, and already he feels like a looming presence, as inevitable as the sun, though as distant as the stars. I lower my eyes and murmur acknowledgement to Master Lin whenever he pauses, hoping I appear composed. Inside, my heart continues to race with a mix of awe and uncertainty. We turn a corner and arrive at a quieter, smaller gate, guarded by two eunuchs who step aside at Master Lin's nod. Beyond lies the living quarters of the concubines, a warren of connected courtyards and halls tucked deep within the palace. Through a carved archway, I step into a tranquil enclosure adorned with a miniature rock garden and peony bushes just beginning to bloom. This will be your residence, Master Lin says softly. A small cluster of curious maidservants peek at me from under a willow tree before hurriedly dispersing. Master Lin gestures, and a woman in her middle years approaches with a kind smile. She is introduced as Yun, one of the senior handmaidens assigned to assist in the concubine's quarters. With a respectful bow, Yun welcomes me and takes me into the residence that will be my new home. She leads me through a wooden door into a modest yet elegant chamber. The scent of jasmine tea and fresh wood polish greets me upon entry. In the dimming light of early evening, I can make out the furnishings. A low platform bed draped with gauzy mosquito netting, its silk coverlet embroidered with mandarin ducks and lotus flowers symbolizing harmony. Beside it stands a small ebony table with a white porcelain wash basin and neatly folded towels. A painted folding screen of cranes in a misty marsh separates the sleeping area from a space with a writing desk and a few shelves holding scrolls and brushes. On the wall hangs a delicate ink painting of mountains and flowing water, reminiscent of my homeland scenery. I marvel at the quiet luxury of this room. Modest by palace standards, perhaps, but every object within is crafted with care and beauty. Yun slides open a lattice window to let in the evening breeze, and I see that it overlooks the little courtyard we passed, where a single lantern now sways gently from the branch of the willow. For a moment, I stand still in the center of the room, my fingers lightly touching the soft silk of the bedding, my mind overwhelmed. How strange that this refined space should be mine to sleep in tonight, when just a week ago I was dozing on a simple mat under a faded quilt. Yun returns to my side with a basin of warm water and a soft cloth so I may wash the dust of travel from my face and hands. She moves efficiently but kindly, her presence motherly in its care. I pat dry and notice my reflection in the bronze mirror on the dressing table. I look pale and tired, eyes shining with too many emotions to name. Yun gently brushes out my long hair, unknotting the tangles from the journey, and begins to pin it up into an elegant style suitable for the palace. She hums a little tune as she works, something soft and reassuring. Before long, my travel-worn clothes have been replaced by a fresh robe that she produces from a cedar chest. It is made of fine, cream-colored silk that feels cool and smooth against my skin. She ties it with a delicate woven belt and steps back to look at me. "There," she says softly. In the mirror, I barely recognize myself. Gone is the dust-covered girl from the road. In her place stands a young court lady with hair neatly coiled and a pearl ornament glinting just above her forehead. The transformation makes my heart twist. It is as thrilling as it is unsettling. I murmur my thanks to Yun. Outside, the light has faded to dusk, and I realize this has been the first time all day that I have paused to catch my breath. A quiet knock at the door interrupts the moment. Another maid enters bearing a lacquered tray with a simple supper prepared for me. She sets it on the small table and bows before departing. Yun urges me to eat and regain my strength. There is a bowl of fragrant rice porridge, pickled vegetables arranged like tiny chrysanthemums, and a cup of hot jasmine tea. I had not noticed my hunger in all the excitement, but now the aroma makes my stomach ache with longing. I sit and take a few tentative bites. The porridge is warm and soothing, reminding me that I have barely eaten since daybreak. Yun leaves me briefly to fetch a few more bedding items, and in that moment of solitude, the reality of the day washes over me. Here I am, in the heart of the imperial palace, eating alone by lamplight in a place where I know no one. A wave of loneliness surges within me, sudden and intense. I miss my mother's voice asking if I've had enough to eat, my father's quiet presence, the sound of my siblings whispering nearby. I blink away the prickling in my eyes and sip the jasmine tea, letting its floral warmth steady me. Night has fully fallen now. Through the open window, a chorus of crickets serenades the darkness. Palace attendants have lit ornate silk lanterns along the covered walkway outside, each glowing with a gentle amber light. Their reflections shimmer in the pond beyond the courtyard, as if the stars themselves have descended to float upon its surface. From somewhere deeper in the maze of palace buildings comes the faint melody of a guzheng zither. The music is soft but clear, each note carrying a wistful sweetness through the night air. I set down my teacup and lean on the windowsill to listen. The player's skill is evident. The tune rises and falls like a quiet conversation, expressing longing and nostalgia without a single word. Perhaps one of the concubines is playing in her chamber to pass the lonely hours. Or a musician performs at a distant pavilion for an intimate gathering. Regardless, the effect is that of a lullaby reaching out to all who dwell in these silent halls. I close my eyes and allow the music to paint images in my mind. I see a moonlit lake and a solitary figure dancing on its shore, her reflection moving on the water in time with the gentle strings. The song is at once sorrowful and hopeful, and it resonates deep in my chest. In those notes, I hear my own emotions given voice. The homesickness I hide behind duty, the hope for kindness in this new life, the vulnerability of a young heart in an unfamiliar world. A sudden deep gong echoes in the distance, low and resonant, making the very walls seem to tremble for a moment. I startle, and Yun, who has just returned, notices my reaction. That is the evening bell from the city gates, she explains softly. So it is true. The great outer gates of Chang'an are sealed each night with the sounding of a bell, locking the world outside in darkness until dawn. The realization sends a chill through me. I am truly separated from the outside now. Even if I wished to run home, those gates would bar the way. I step out to the veranda for a moment and gaze at the night sky, drawing my robe around me against the cool air. Above, the firmament stretches vast and clear. The moon has risen, now high above the palace roofs, a brilliant coin suspended in indigo. Its pale light silvers the eaves and smooth stone pathways with a ghostly sheen. I think of my family at this very hour. They must be finished with their supper, perhaps stepping into the yard to look at the moon and wonder how I am faring on my first day here. We are under the same moon, and yet my family feels impossibly distant from me. In that moment, I recall the old tale of Chang'e, the moon goddess who lives alone in the cold lunar palace, separated forever from her loved ones on earth. Legend says she gazes down with longing each night, her face forever turned toward home. As the moonlight touches my cheeks, I imagine gentle Chang'e looking upon me with pity and understanding. The silver glow feels like a quiet reassurance, a reminder that I am not truly alone under this sky. Yun gently calls me back inside, concerned that the night air might chill me. She has brought a copper warming pan to slide under my quilt and takes a moment to point out where my night clothes have been laid and where my trunk of belongings now sits. Before she leaves, she quietly informs me of the routine for tomorrow. At the break of dawn, a bell will ring, and I must rise to dress and join the other concubines in greeting Her Majesty the Empress. I nod and repeat the instructions back to her to be sure I've understood. My voice sounds oddly calm, even to myself, as if someone else is speaking. In truth, weariness has begun to settle into my bones, dulling the sharp edge of my nervousness. Yung gives me an encouraging smile. "Rest well, my lady," she says as she departs, sliding the door shut with a soft click. I am left standing in the gentle glow of a solitary lantern, the quiet of the night pressing in around me. Alone at last, I change into the sleeping gown laid out for me, a simple robe of light cotton that feels cool against my skin. I sit at the edge of the bed and carefully unwind the pins from my hair, letting the long dark strands tumble loose down my back. The events of the day swirl in my mind, and for a moment I can only breathe slowly, in and out, trying to release the tension in my chest. I fold the cream silk palace robe and set it aside, running my fingers over its fine embroidery one more time, as if to convince myself this is all real. Slipping under the silk coverlet, I sink into the bed. It is softer than anything I've ever slept on, giving gently under my weight like a cloud. The linens carry a faint scent of lavender. Through the thin canopy drapes, I can see the lantern's light painting flickering patterns on the ceiling. I blow out the lamp, and my world narrows to the pale glow of moonlight seeping through the window and the chorus of night insects outside. In the darkness, every sensation feels amplified. I hear my own breathing and the rapid thump of my heart finally beginning to slow. The silk of the sheets is cool and smooth against my arms, a constant reminder that I am far from the rough cotton of my childhood bedding. I can still taste a hint of jasmine on my lips and smell the lingering trace of incense that seems embedded in the very walls of this palace. I tell myself I should sleep. Tomorrow will likely be as overwhelming as today, and I will need my strength. But my mind refuses to rest. The moment I close my eyes, vivid images from this day dance behind my eyelids. The colossal red gates yawning open, the golden sunlight on the marble halls, the elegant concubines gliding like swans, the emperor's majestic hall standing silent and immense. Faces and feelings flicker in the dark. Master Lin's measured gaze, Yun's kind smile, the curious eyes of the women in the garden, the haunting notes of the guzheng. All these pieces of a life so new and strange to me now swirl together, refusing to settle. Eventually, however, exhaustion begins to overtake anxiety. My thoughts grow hazy, and one image flows into another like watercolors bleeding on paper. I drift at last on the edge of sleep, and as I do, a dream unfolds. I am back in my family's courtyard under the shade of our cherry blossom tree. Pink petals rain down around me as a warm breeze blows. I hear my little brother's laughter and see him running through the gate, a bright kite dancing in his hands. I call out and chase after him, my bare feet pounding on the packed earth. He slips away giggling, and I follow him out. But outside the gate, I find not our familiar village path, but a vast palace corridor stretching endlessly. The polished floor reflects my face, now painted and adorned like a concubine, and my bare feet are gone, replaced by embroidered slippers. My brother is nowhere to be seen. I wander the corridor, my footsteps echoing. Paper lanterns line the walls, their light growing dimmer as I proceed. Far ahead, I notice one door slightly ajar, golden light pouring from it. I move toward it, heart thudding with a mix of hope and dread. Inside, I see a great throne room filled with shimmering light, too bright to look at directly. Silhouetted against that radiance is a lone figure standing before the imperial throne, his back turned to me. His robes are imperial gold, a dragon emblazoned across the fabric. I cannot see his face, but I know it must be the emperor. I try to speak, to call out to him, but no sound leaves my throat. Suddenly, the dragon on his robe seems to ripple and come alive, and the floor beneath me starts to shift like sand. The light intensifies, and just as the figure begins to turn toward me, I wake with a gasp. My eyes fly open to darkness and silence. My heart is hammering against my ribs, and a fine sheen of sweat cools my brow. It takes a few moments for me to remember where I am. In my chamber, in the heart of the emperor's palace, safe, and that the vision was only a dream. The night is still and deep. Through the window, the moon has traversed further west, but still casts a pale luminance. I sit up in bed and draw back the gauzy bed curtain to drink in the sight of that moon and to steady my breath. The dream has left me unsettled. Yet strangely, it has also crystallized my resolve. I swing my feet to the floor and kneel by the window where a rectangle of moonlight has spilled onto the wooden boards. In that silvered light, I clasp my hands and offer a silent prayer to my ancestors, to the spirits of this land, to any benevolent force that might be listening. I pray for courage and wisdom to find my way in this labyrinthine world of the court. I pray for the strength to endure whatever may come, and for the grace not to lose myself in the process. And I pray that my family, far outside these walls, remain safe and proud, so that my sacrifice in leaving them will not be in vain. A calmness comes over me as I form these voiceless words. I wipe the tear that has slipped down my cheek. The palace around me is as quiet as a sleeping beast. Somewhere far away, I hear the faint call of a night watchman and the soft hoot of an owl. I remind myself that I have made it through this first daunting day. Though I arrived as nothing more than a bewildered girl, by tomorrow I will begin to learn my role as a lady of the court. I resolve to be resilient, to bend like a willow in the storm rather than break. If I am but one small star in a sky filled with others, I will not despair. Even a small star still shines its light, and perhaps in time I will find my place in this vast constellation. At last, I return to my bed and lie down once more. Pulling the embroidered coverlet up to my chin, I let out a long, slow breath. Above me, the canopy drapes stir slightly with a night breeze that slips through the cracked window, and the fragrance of distant blossoms accompanies it. My eyelids grow heavy. In the darkness behind my closed eyes, I no longer see visions of home or palace halls. There's only a gentle, infinite midnight. As I finally surrender to sleep, I carry with me the quiet echo of the guzheng's melody and the faint taste of jasmine. This first night in the imperial palace enfolds me like a dream, full of unanswered questions, flickers of hope, and the lingering whisper of loneliness. In that dream-like hush, I float into slumber, ready or not, for the dawn of whatever tomorrow will bring. I rose at dawn to the chime of a distant bell, its solemn tone echoing through the palace like a wave across still water. Sleep clung to me, heavy and stubborn. But the maidservant Yun was already at my side, helping me dress with brisk, practiced motions. She wound my hair into a modest bun, slid a pearl pin through the knot, and fastened a robe of pale blue silk around me. My heart pounded as she whispered instructions. Today, I was to accompany the younger concubines and stand before her ladyship, Yang Guifei, the favored consort of the emperor himself. The name was a legend whispered even in the most remote provinces. To stand in her presence felt impossible, like a moth daring to approach the moon. We assembled in the courtyard before the Hall of Everlasting Radiance, a place said to be the jewel of the inner court. Columns painted the color of cinnabar stretched upward, their beams carved with golden phoenixes that gleamed in the morning sun. The flagstones beneath my slippers were polished smooth, cool against my tentative steps. Around me, the other concubines stood in neat rows, each adorned in delicate silks that fluttered softly in the breeze. Their faces were powdered to the palest ivory, lips painted like the first bloom of camellia, eyes darkened with subtle strokes of ink. I, plain among them, lowered my gaze, afraid that my inexperience would betray me. Then, from within the hall, the sound of music drifted, an ensemble of flutes and zithers, their notes rising like the scent of blossoms carried on the wind. The massive doors slid open, and attendants in robes of silver and jade stepped aside. Silence fell over the courtyard, and then she appeared. Yang Guifei, she moved with the grace of flowing water, her presence at once ethereal and commanding. Her robe shimmered in hues of peach and ivory, embroidered with golden lotuses that caught the sunlight with every step. Sleeves long and trailing whispered across the floor as if they carried secrets of the wind. Around her slender neck lay a string of luminous pearls, each one glowing softly as though imbued with moonlight. Her face. How could I describe it? It was not merely beauty, though her features were balanced with the harmony of a painter's brushstroke. It was the serenity in her gaze, the calm assurance of a woman who knew she was beloved not only by a man, but by history itself. Her hair was arranged in the towering style of the Tang court, swept upward in dark coils adorned with gold hairpins shaped like phoenixes taking flight. A faint fragrance preceded her, delicate yet intoxicating, notes of plum blossom and musk, a scent said to be her signature, recognizable from afar. The women around me bowed deeply, sleeves touching the stone floor. I hastened to follow, lowering my head until my forehead nearly brushed the hem of my robe. My breath came quick and shallow. I feared she might hear the frantic beating of my heart. She paused before us, her shadow falling across my bowed form. "Rise," she said softly. Her voice was low, melodic, threaded with both gentleness and command. We obeyed as one, lifting our heads. For a moment her gaze swept across the gathered concubines. When her eyes met mine, even for the briefest instant, I felt as if I had been touched by fire and chilled by ice at once. My knees weakened, yet I stood frozen in awe. Yang Guifei began to walk among us, speaking with her attendants, occasionally offering a word of encouragement to one concubine, a gentle correction to another. She did not need to raise her voice. Her presence alone commanded attention. When she drew near again, one of her maids beckoned me forward. I stumbled a step, startled, my palms damp with nervous sweat. "This is one of the new arrivals," the maid announced softly. Yang Guifei turned her full gaze upon me. The world seemed to blur around her, as though the courtyard, the music, and even the sky had all fallen silent to watch this moment. "What is your name?" she asked. My lips trembled. "This unworthy one is called May," I whispered. offering the name I had been given upon entering the palace. My true childhood name remained hidden, a secret kept safe in my heart. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. It was not a smile of mockery, nor of indifference, but one of quiet recognition, as though she saw through the dust of my travels and the fear in my soul to something deeper. "May," she repeated, her voice lingering on the syllable like a note plucked from a zither. A name for a plum blossom, delicate yet enduring through winter's frost. A good name, her words sank into me like warmth spreading through cold veins. I lowered my eyes quickly to hide the tears that threatened. To be acknowledged, even in passing by such a figure, it felt like being chosen by fate itself. She turned and continued onward, her sleeves trailing like clouds in her wake. The concubines exhaled softly as though a breeze had passed over them. The music swelled again from within the hall, and attendants brought trays of tea and sweet cakes. But I could scarcely taste or hear. My thoughts spun in a whirl of wonder and disbelief. I had stood in the presence of Yang Guifei, the woman whose beauty was said to shake empires, whose favor had captured the emperor's heart so completely that poets sang of her in verses destined to echo for centuries. And she had spoken to me. That night, in my chamber, I lay awake long after the lantern had been extinguished, replaying the encounter in my mind. The echo of her voice haunted me, as did the image of her serene smile. Yet beneath my awe stirred something more dangerous. A realization that within these walls, beauty was both shield and sword, and to stand too close to the brightest flame might mean to be consumed by it. The first time I witnessed the splendor of an imperial banquet, I thought I had been transported into a dream spun by the gods. The hall of glorious harmony was alive with 1,000 lanterns, each glowing orb suspended from carved beams painted in crimson and gold. The ceiling soared high above, lost in shadows and constellations of twinkling light, while the marble floors reflected every flicker of flame like a mirror of stars. Incense drifted in curling tendrils through the vast hall, filling the air with a mingled fragrance of sandalwood, frankincense, and rare spices brought from distant lands along the Silk Road. We concubines entered in procession, our silken robes rustling like the wings of butterflies. Musicians were already seated upon the raised platform at the far end of the hall, their instruments gleaming under lantern light. Zithers, pipas, flutes, and drums. When they struck the opening notes, the hall itself seemed to awaken. The music shimmered, rippling like water, soaring like cranes, beating like the pulse of the earth. The long banquet tables were laden with dishes that dazzled the senses. Platters of steaming duck glazed with honey and ginger, delicate dumplings shaped like lotus buds, fresh lychees piled high in silver bowls, and golden cakes infused with almond and rose water. The scents mingled into a rich perfume that made my mouth water even as my nerves stilled my appetite. Attendants moved gracefully among us, pouring warmed rice wine into jade cups that caught the lantern light like liquid fire. And then the emperor entered. The hall fell silent, save for the steady rhythm of the drums announcing his approach. Emperor Xuanzong moved with measured dignity, his robes of golden silk embroidered with dragons that seemed to writhe and breathe with each step. His face, though lined with years, radiated authority tempered with a certain serenity. The court bowed as one, the sound of silks brushing stone echoing like the sigh of the sea. I bent low, forehead nearly touching the floor, heart racing so fiercely I feared it might betray me. When at last I dared to lift my gaze, I saw him seated upon the dragon throne, high-backed and gilded, beneath a canopy of embroidered clouds. To his right stood Yang Guifei, luminous in her elegance, her presence beside him like the moon beside the sun. The emperor's eyes softened as they rested upon her, and the faintest smile curved his lips. In that moment, I understood why poets called theirs a love that could topple dynasties. It was visible, undeniable, a thread of devotion binding them in the gaze they shared. The music swelled. Dancers entered the hall, their robes of rainbow silk unfurling as they spun, trailing ribbons like streams of light. They moved in perfect harmony, their sleeves fluttering as though the very air had become a canvas painted with color and motion. At the height of the performance, one dancer leapt high into the air, her long ribbons curling around her like wings. The court gasped softly, as if witnessing a divine apparition. I stood among the younger concubines, my hands clasped before me, utterly entranced. Never in my small village life could I have imagined such magnificence. Every detail, the music, the flavors, the shimmering lanterns, the regal presence of the emperor and his beloved consort seemed woven together into a tapestry of dream and desire. Yet beneath the wonder, a quiet unease lingered. For in this world of endless beauty and splendor, I could not forget the sharp glance of rival concubines, nor the whispered truth that favor was as fragile as a falling petal. Day by day, I began to glimpse more of palace life beyond the banquets. In the mornings, the air was filled with the delicate strains of music as concubines rehearsed songs and dances in the courtyards. In the afternoons, we strolled through gardens where peonies and chrysanthemums bloomed in dazzling profusion. Koi fish swam lazily beneath curved bridges, and the air was heavy with the scent of osmanthus blossoms. Eunuchs glided silently along the covered corridors, carrying scrolls or trays of jewels, their expressions unreadable masks. Even the sparrows that flitted among the roof tiles seemed to move in measured, graceful patterns, as though they too had learned the rhythm of imperial life. And yet, despite the endless grandeur, I could not escape a sense of smallness. Surrounded by women whose beauty shone like polished jade, by halls vast enough to hold the sky, by ceremonies as intricate as the stars themselves, I felt as fragile as a single drop of dew trembling on the edge of a lotus leaf. I was here, yes, a witness to glory. But whether I would ever rise beyond being a shadow among so many radiant lights, I could not say. Still, when night fell and the lanterns were lit once more, painting the palace in a golden haze, I could not deny the enchantment that surrounded me. I was a concubine of the Tang court, a living fragment of its splendor, swept into the current of history like a leaf carried down the great river. And though I was small, I was part of the dream. The banquet stretched on like an endless river of sound and light. As the musicians played, their fingers danced across strings and bamboo holes with a mastery that made every note seem alive. The pipa gave out cascading ripples of melody, while the flutes carried the tune upward, as if the music itself longed to fly beyond the lantern-lit ceiling. The drums, deep and resonant, beat like a second heart inside my chest. Together, the instruments created a harmony that seemed too perfect for mortal ears, like the music of celestial maidens in the stories my grandmother once told me. Servants moved quietly through the throng, balancing trays of delicacies so artfully arranged they seemed more like paintings than food. I saw slices of roasted goose brushed with plum sauce that gleamed like amber under the lantern light. Bowls of delicate tofu, carved into shapes of blossoms, floated in clear broth scented with ginger and scallion. Whole fish steamed with fragrant herbs was garnished with sprigs of coriander that reminded me faintly of the gardens of my village. There were sweetmeats filled with lotus seed paste and golden pastries so delicate that they crumbled at the lightest touch. When one of the attendants offered me a plate, I hesitated, then took a bite of candied walnut wrapped in sesame. The taste was at once sweet, smoky, and bitter, a flavor as layered as the life I had stepped into. Wine flowed freely in jade cups, its warmth loosening the laughter of courtiers, though I dared not drink more than a sip. Each time I raised the cup to my lips, I thought of the emperor seated upon the throne, his gaze fixed not on the feast, but on Yang Guifei. Their bond was like an invisible current flowing through the hall. Even when they said nothing, their silence spoke volumes. When she lifted her sleeve to adjust a strand of hair, his eyes followed the motion as if it were the most important gesture in the world. When he leaned slightly toward her to whisper a word, her soft smile answered him more eloquently than any poem. Around them, 100 courtiers schemed, envied, and bowed. But at the center of it all was simply a man and a woman, bound by a love so consuming that it made the entire court bend toward their flame. The dancers returned, this time in greater numbers. They wore robes dyed in hues of sunrise, gold, vermilion, and rose, layered upon one another so that every spin sent colors rippling like waves across the floor. Long ribbons trailed from their sleeves, catching the light as they moved, until the air seemed painted with rivers of silk. Their hair was adorned with ornaments that glittered like constellations, and their cheeks were flushed with the exertion of the dance. One moment they were a swirl of color and motion, the next they froze in perfect stillness, like figures preserved in jade. When the music shifted to a faster rhythm, their sleeves whipped through the air, brushing close enough to stir the candles, and their voices joined in soft chanting, weaving human sound into the tapestry of instruments. I could not breathe. My eyes followed every gesture, every arc of a hand or tilt of a chin. These were not merely dancers. They were priestesses of beauty, weaving spells to enthrall the emperor and all who watched. And it worked. The hall was captive to their grace, from the stern generals who forgot their wine to the eunuchs who allowed themselves the rarest of smiles. The banquet carried on into the night. Between the dances and songs, poets stepped forward to recite verses in honor of the emperor and his beloved. Their words soared like cranes, praising the dynasty, the heavens, and the unmatched radiance of Yang Guifei. One young poet, trembling but resolute, recited lines comparing her to the goddess of the moon, Chang'e, and the emperor to the radiant sun. The hall echoed with applause, though I sensed some poets spoke not only to praise but to curry favor. Every syllable seemed to be both art and calculation. When the feasting finally slowed, I stepped out briefly into one of the palace courtyards. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of osmanthus blossoms. Lanterns floated on the pond, their flames mirrored on the water so perfectly it looked as though two skies existed, one above, one below. I pressed my hands together as if to steady myself. My senses were overwhelmed. My ears still rang with music. My lips tingled with the taste of wine. My eyes dazzled with colors and jewels. My skin burned with the awareness of where I stood. This was not just a banquet. It was a lesson, a revelation. The palace was not simply walls and rooms, nor was it merely the emperor's dwelling. It was a living stage where beauty, power, love, and danger performed together without pause. And I, a newcomer, was one of the countless players in this endless play. In the days that followed, I began to see more of the rhythm of court life. Each morning, the palace stirred with the sound of instruments as concubines practiced dances and songs. The courtyards were filled with the flutter of sleeves and the beat of drums, while tutors called out instructions in gentle but firm voices. Some of the women trained tirelessly, their faces serene masks, hiding ambition sharp as steel. Others whispered together in shaded corners, alliances forming as naturally as shadows at noon. Afternoons brought quieter splendor. We walked in pairs or small groups through the imperial gardens, where peacocks fanned their jeweled tails and carp splashed beneath bridges carved like rainbows of stone. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming peonies, and everywhere there were colors, pinks, reds, whites, and purples that seemed to rival even the finest silks. We paused by pavilions where scholars painted scenes of mountains and rivers, or by shaded alcoves where storytellers recited tales of ancient kings. Even in these moments of calm, I felt the weight of eyes upon me. The watchful gaze of eunuchs, the quiet appraisal of senior concubines, the invisible scrutiny of the empress herself. Life in the palace was beauty wrapped around vigilance, like a blossom that hid thorns beneath its petals. And yet, there were moments of pure wonder, too. One evening, as the sun sank behind the palace roofs, the musicians gathered at a lakeside pavilion and played the rainbow skirt and feathered garment dance, said to be the emperor's favorite composition. Yang Guifei herself rose to dance, her sleeves floating as if she carried clouds in her hands. We all watched, silent, our breaths stolen. Her movements were not hurried nor forced, but gentle, fluid, as if the music obeyed her rather than she obeying it. Even the setting sun seemed to pause, gilding her with its last rays. In that moment, I knew why poets compared her to goddesses. She was not merely a woman. She was a vision that made mortals believe in the divine. And I, standing at the edge of it all, trembled with awe and fear. For I had seen the splendor of the Tang court, and it was dazzling, intoxicating, and perilous all at once. Night in the palace has a voice of its own. When the banquets fade and the lanterns burn low, when the laughter of courtiers drifts away like smoke, silence descends in layers, soft, heavy, yet never empty. I lie awake beneath gauzy curtains, listening to the rustle of bamboo in the courtyard, the distant echo of a night watchman's gong, the mournful cry of an owl perched somewhere in the shadows. It is in these hours, when sleep eludes me, that my thoughts wander to the old tales my grandmother told me by the hearth. She spoke often of Chang'e, the moon goddess, who drank the elixir of immortality and rose alone to the heavens, condemned to live forever. in the cold palace of the moon. Though adored for her beauty, she was exiled by fate, gazing eternally down upon the earth she could never touch again. I feel her presence most keenly when I look out my window at the round, glowing moon. Its pale light drapes across the palace roofs, turning tiles to silver and shadows to pools of ink. I imagine Chang'e there, sitting in solitude, her robes flowing like mist, her eyes filled with longing. And in her story, I glimpse my own reflection. For am I not also bound to a palace? Glorious, yes, but also confining. Surrounded by silks and jewels, yet cut off from the simple life I once knew, from the warmth of family, from the freedom of choice. Sometimes, in dreams, I walk beside her in that cold lunar palace. She takes my hand and whispers secrets of survival. That beauty can be both shield and chain, that silence can conceal strength, that longing can become its own kind of prayer. I wake with tears on my cheeks, unsure whether they are hers or mine. During the day, when I watch the dancers and hear the poets sing of Yang Guifei's splendor, I cannot help but think of Chang'e too. The court calls Yang Guifei the living moon of the Tang Dynasty, radiant beyond compare. And indeed, she is luminous, like a jewel set against the dark silk of night. But I wonder, does she too feel the loneliness of the goddess, worshipped yet imprisoned by her own radiance? One evening, after a rehearsal of music in the courtyard, I lingered by the lotus pond while others drifted away. The water was still, a perfect mirror reflecting the round moon above. I tossed a pebble into its surface, and the ripples shattered the reflection into 1,000 trembling fragments. In that broken light, I thought, such is the life of a concubine. The world may see only beauty, a flawless circle glowing in the sky. But beneath, within, the surface trembles with unseen waves, distorting what lies beneath. I whispered then, almost to myself, Chang'e, if you hear me, lend me your strength. Teach me how to endure this loneliness, how to keep my heart whole even when my body belongs to the palace. The words vanished into the night air, but I fancied that the moonlight glowed brighter for a moment, as if in silent reply. These nightly whispers became my secret ritual. Each time the moon rose, I spoke to her, sometimes with questions, sometimes with confessions, sometimes with nothing but silence. In her pale glow, I felt less alone. The goddess, though far above, was a companion in exile. She bore witness to my doubts and my hopes, to the small joys and sharp fears of a girl learning to survive in the labyrinth of the court. And slowly, I began to weave my own legend inside me. If history remembered only emperors and their favored consorts, if poets sang only of beauty untouchable, then at least the moon would remember the whispers of one nameless concubine, offered into the night like petals scattered upon water. The moon has become my confidant. Each night, when silence cloaks the palace and shadows stretch long across the courtyards, I turn my gaze upward to that glowing circle, pale and eternal. Sometimes the moon seems close enough that I could reach out and brush its surface with my fingertips. At other times it feels impossibly distant, a reminder of all I have lost. I remember how, as a child, I used to sit on the roof of my family's cottage, my legs dangling over the edge, watching the same moon climb above the fields. My grandmother would join me, her voice a low murmur as she spun tales into the night. "Do you see her?" she would ask, pointing at the silvery glow. "That is Chang'e, the goddess of the moon. She lives alone, far from those she loves. But her beauty lights the world below. Even in her sorrow, she is radiant. I would listen, wide-eyed, imagining the goddess robed in white, pacing her lonely halls of jade and crystal. Back then, I pitied her. Now, within these palace walls, I understand her more deeply than I ever wished to. The courtiers see us as ornaments, as petals arranged to delight the eye. But beneath the silk and perfume, there are hearts that beat, souls that ache, longings that whisper when the halls grow quiet. Like Chang'e, we are admired, but we are also confined. Our radiance, both our gift and our prison. Some nights I dream vividly of the moon goddess. In one dream, she sits by a window of pure crystal, gazing down at the earth with sorrowful eyes. Her hair flows like a river of black silk across the floor, and in her lap lies a small rabbit, its fur glowing white. She turns to me and says, "Endure, child. The world may cage you, but it cannot chain your thoughts." I wake with her words echoing in my ears, trembling as though I have truly been touched by divinity. Other nights, my dreams are darker. I walk through endless corridors of the palace, their walls rising higher and higher until they block the sky. The moon disappears, and I am lost in a labyrinth of red lacquer and shadow. I call out for Chang'e, for my mother, for anyone. But only silence answers. I wake gasping, clutching the coverlet, grateful when the moonlight streaming through my window reassures me that I am not swallowed whole by this place. There are evenings when the moonlight falls across the lotus pond in the courtyard, and I linger by the water's edge, remembering my childhood. My brother used to chase fireflies in the fields, his laughter echoing through the night. My mother would light a lantern and set it afloat on the river, whispering prayers for peace. Here in the palace, lanterns float too, but they are crafted of silk and gold. Their prayers meant for emperors and dynasties, not for humble families. Yet when I watch them drift across the pond, I imagine my mother's lantern among them, glowing faintly, carrying her love all the way to me. And always, above it all, is the moon, constant, impartial, radiant. She listens without judgment. She comforts without words. I have begun to believe that each whisper I send into her light is carried upward, woven into her eternal solitude. Perhaps she collects them, the prayers of countless women, concubines, mothers, daughters, who have looked to her across the centuries. Perhaps she too is weary of listening, yet continues because she knows what it means to be unheard. One night, overcome with loneliness, I whispered aloud, "Chang'e, if your heart still remembers love, then do not let mine wither. If you know sorrow, then teach me strength. If you are condemned to shine forever alone, then help me find solace in my own small light." The words felt fragile as they left my lips, but the breeze stirred at that very moment, and the ripples of the pond shimmered as though in answer. My heart calmed, and for the first time, I fell asleep easily, carried into dreams not of fear, but of stars. Thus, between the splendor of day and the silence of night, between the brilliance of Yang Guifei and the pale glow of the moon, my world began to shape itself. I was neither wholly free nor wholly bound. I was a shadow among goddesses, a voice among whispers, a plum blossom trembling beneath eternal frost. And though my place seemed small in the quiet communion with the moon, I discovered a fragile kind of strength, born not of power, but of endurance. By day, the palace glitters with music and laughter, but by night, Its corridors whisper with secrets. I soon learned the beauty here was not simply admired. It was a weapon, sharpened and polished until it gleamed brighter than jade. The other concubines greeted me with graceful smiles, yet behind their painted lips flickered shadows of calculation. In the courtyards, they laughed together, their voices like tinkling bells. But I noticed how their eyes lingered on one another's robes, how their compliments always carried the faintest edge of envy. A misplaced bow, a poorly chosen word, even the tilt of a head could be the spark that ignited silent wars. At first, I thought myself too insignificant to be noticed. But whispers travel quickly in the palace. I caught fragments murmured as I passed. She is new, from the provinces. The lady favored her name. Even such small acknowledgments were enough to paint a target on my back. Some concubines began to offer me sweet fruits, little gifts wrapped in silk, their kindnesses heavy with unspoken debt. Others turned their heads away, as though my presence were a stain upon their carefully woven hierarchies. It was Yun, my handmaiden, who warned me gently. As she brushed my hair one evening, she leaned close and whispered, "Be cautious, little plum blossom. Every smile here hides a dagger. Those who call you sister today may trade your name for favor tomorrow." Her words settled into me like stones sinking into water. The rivalries were not only among women. Eunuchs carried messages, traded gossip, and formed alliances of their own. I once overheard two of them speaking in hushed tones near the kitchens, their voices muffled by the steam of boiling pots. General An grows restless. The emperor trusts him too much, and her lady asks too often for indulgence. At my approach, they fell silent, their expressions smoothed into unreadable masks. But the weight of their words lingered with me, like smoke clinging to silk. Within the women's quarters, I began to see the quiet strategies that governed survival. Some cultivated friendships with musicians, ensuring their songs would praise them in subtle ways. Others bribed servants to place them near the emperor during ceremonies. A few clung to Yang Guifei's favor, their devotion as visible as the jewels in their hair. To remain unseen was safer, but invisibility also meant being forgotten. I felt caught between two choices: to fade quietly into the background, or to risk stepping forward into the dangerous light. Each night I wrestled with my fear, staring at the moon, wondering what Chang'e would counsel. To be admired is peril, I thought. But to be ignored is another kind of death. And always, beneath the shimmering surface of silks and songs, there pulsed a darker rhythm. Rumors of discontent among the soldiers, of ministers muttering behind closed doors, of the emperor's growing distraction by love. All drifted like unseen currents beneath the golden halls. Though I was only a concubine, I sensed that the palace itself was a great stage, and that behind the beauty of its performances, storms were gathering. The first wound I suffered in the palace was not from a blade, but from a smile. One morning, as we gathered in the garden to rehearse a dance, Lady Lin, an older concubine with eyes as sharp as polished obsidian, approached me. Her robe was the color of autumn chrysanthemums, rich and deep, her lips painted crimson like spilled wine. She touched my sleeve lightly, almost tenderly, and said, "Little May, your steps are charming, though a bit rustic. Do not worry. The emperor prefers innocence, after all." The other women tittered behind their sleeves. I bowed quickly to hide the heat rushing to my face. Rustic. The word clung to me like dust. I knew she meant it as both compliment and insult. A reminder that my roots were provincial, that I was not yet molded into the polished jade of court life. Later, another concubine, Lady Hua, pressed a small sachet of jasmine into my hand. "For restful sleep," she said sweetly. But Yun, suspicious as ever, sniffed it before letting me keep it. "Powdered poppy," she whispered to me afterward, her brow furrowed. "It would have left you weak, pale, and pliant. Perhaps not dangerous in small doses, but enough to make you stumble at the wrong time." My fingers trembled as I tucked the sachet into a drawer, a reminder of how fragile trust was here. Even in the dining hall, the rivalries played out like a silent play. When the trays of delicacies were set before us, women reached not only for food, but for symbols. To be served a slice of lychee, the emperor's favorite fruit, was considered auspicious. To receive a seat near Yang Guifei meant protection, but also envy. I learned quickly to lower my eyes, to let others jostle gently with words rather than elbows, to take only what was offered without reaching too far. Ambition, if too visible, was as dangerous as carelessness. At night, I sometimes heard whispers drifting through the corridors. Women gathered in pairs beneath lanterns, speaking in low voices that cut off the moment footsteps approached. Some forged alliances, trading favors like jewels. Others spread subtle rumors that Lady So-and-so had gained weight, that another had fallen from the emperor's notice, that another had grown bold in her requests. Each rumor was a stone cast into still water, ripples spreading outward until they touched us all. Once, I found myself alone in the library, admiring scrolls of poetry left open on a low desk. Lady Lin entered quietly, her perfume of sandalwood announcing her before her voice. She smiled, but her eyes were cool. "Do you read poetry, little May?" she asked. I nodded timidly. She ran her fingers across the verses, then said, "A concubine should be like a poem, pleasing, memorable, but never too long, lest it bore the reader. Remember that." Then she left, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. I sat frozen, realizing she had not spoken of poems at all, but of women like me. Yun warned me constantly, her hands steady as she combed my hair each night. "Do not let them see you falter. They will pounce on weakness like hawks on a sparrow. Listen more than you speak. Keep your secrets as you would your jewels." I nodded, though inside I felt torn. To stay silent was safety, but silence could also erase me. Still, in rare moments, kindness appeared. A younger concubine named Lady Xu once slipped me a pearly hairpin carved in the shape of a plum blossom. "We share a name," she said shyly, smiling in a way that felt genuine. For a fleeting moment, warmth bloomed in my chest. But even as I accepted the gift, Yun's warning rang in my ears. In this palace, even kindness might carry its own cost. The deeper I stepped into this world, the more I felt its contradictions. Beauty wrapped around cruelty, laughter laced with venom, friendship shadowed by suspicion. And though I was only one small blossom in a vast garden, I knew that every glance, every gesture, every word might shape my fate. The palace was no longer just marble halls and painted roofs. It was a labyrinth of rivalries, each corner hiding both danger and opportunity. I walked carefully, my head bowed, but my heart awake. One afternoon, The empress had summoned all concubines to the Hall of Fragrant Clouds for a poetry recital. The hall was a place of delicate beauty, with walls painted in pale shades of jade and lotus blossoms winding across the beams. We gathered on embroidered cushions, each woman arranged in careful order of rank. The air was heavy with the perfume of burning agar wood, its sweet smoke curling upward like the prayers of unseen spirits. A eunuch stepped forward with a lacquered tray bearing slips of silk inscribed with verses. It was tradition, I learned, for the women to recite or compose poems to please the court. When the tray passed before me, I lowered my eyes and drew a slip, my hands trembling. My verse spoke of plum blossoms surviving winter frost. Simple, sincere, and perhaps too plain for such an exalted audience. Lady Lin, seated nearby, recited hers first. Her voice flowed like honey as she praised the emperor in metaphors of golden dragons and eternal suns. The courtiers smiled approvingly, and I saw the flicker of pride in her eyes. When my turn came, I recited softly, my words shy but true. A few attendants murmured in appreciation. I thought perhaps I had survived unscathed. But then, Lady Hua rose. Her robe shimmered with threads of gold, and she carried herself like a queen. With a smile too sweet to be innocent, she began her poem. Her verses described fragile blossoms that dared to stand beside the radiant peony, only to wither in shame. The words were beautiful, but the sting beneath them was clear. She did not speak of flowers. She spoke of women. She spoke of me. A hush fell as the others absorbed her meaning. Some glanced at me from the corners of their eyes, lips curved in secret amusement. My heart hammered, and I felt the blood drain from my cheeks. I wanted to vanish into the floor, but before the silence thickened into cruelty, Yang Guifei herself, who had been seated at the head of the hall, laughed softly. "Pretty words," she said, her tone calm but edged with something unreadable. Yet every flower has its season. Even the smallest bloom can bring fragrance to spring. The tension broke. The courtiers laughed politely, though I saw Lady Hua's smile falter for the briefest instant. Relief washed over me, mingled with awe. The lady's words had shielded me, not with sharpness, but with grace. Still, the incident carved itself into my memory. I learned that day how quickly admiration could turn to mockery, how easily a name could be tarnished by a clever tongue. And I understood, more clearly than ever, that every gathering was a battlefield, each verse a weapon, each smile a mask. That night, when Yun brushed my hair, she whispered, "Did you see, my lady? That is how wars are fought here. Not with swords, but with words. Not with blood, but with shame." I nodded, my throat tight. She was right. The palace was an endless play, and survival required not only beauty, but wit, restraint, and the courage to endure humiliation without letting it wound the core of the soul. I went to bed late, but sleep did not come easily. The image of Lady Hua's triumphant smile haunted me, as did Yang Guifei's serene defense. I realized how fragile my place was, how even a slip of silk with ink upon it could shape my destiny. And as I stared at the moonlight on the floor, I whispered to Chang'e once more, "Teach me patience. Teach me silence. Teach me when to endure and when to rise." A few weeks after the poetry gathering, another kind of battle unfolded. This one fought not with verses, but with silk and jewels. The emperor had announced a small evening banquet, intimate compared to the grand feasts but no less charged with tension. Such occasions, I quickly learned, were opportunities for concubines to shine, to be noticed, to step into the emperor's gaze, if only for a fleeting moment. And in a world where a glance could change a woman's fortune, every detail mattered. That afternoon, the women's quarters buzzed with restless energy. Attendants hurried from chamber to chamber carrying trays of ornaments, boxes of cosmetics, bolts of embroidered silk. Laughter rang out in one hall, sharp whispers in another. The air was thick with the scent of powders, perfumes, and anticipation. Lady Lin appeared in the corridor, draped in a robe of pale gold, her hair adorned with a phoenix crown studded with pearls so luminous they seemed to drink in the light. She moved slowly, savoring the way others turned to look. Behind her, Lady Hua swept past in a storm of crimson silk, the hem of her gown embroidered with dragons and golden thread. Her earrings glittered with sapphires that swung with every step, scattering blue sparks into the air. The two women exchanged polite bows, their lips curved in smiles as sharp as daggers. I stood to one side, dressed in a robe of soft lavender Yun had chosen for me. Simple compared to theirs, but honest to my spirit. My heart pounded as I watched them, wondering if my plainness was safety or invisibility. That evening, the hall was smaller, more intimate, the lanterns casting a warm glow across polished wood and silk banners. The emperor sat at the head, Yang Guifei at his side, her beauty effortlessly eclipsing even the grandest attire of the other women. Yet still the concubines competed fiercely, each maneuvering for a place closer to him. When the attendants announced the seating, Lady Hua moved gracefully forward. But Lady Lin intercepted her with a bow that was just a little too slow, her sleeve deliberately sweeping across the space. In the shuffle, Lady Hua's jewel-studded sleeve caught on the edge of Lady Lin's robe, tugging at the delicate silk. There was the faint sound of tearing. Gasps rippled through the room. For a heartbeat, silence froze us all. Lady Hua's eyes flashed, but her smile never faltered. "Ah, forgive me, elder sister," she said sweetly, her tone honey laced with venom. "My eagerness must have made me clumsy." She adjusted her robe, concealing the tear, but her gaze burned like fire. Lady Lin bowed in return, her voice smooth. "Think nothing of it, younger sister. Such accidents happen when one rushes forward without patience." The words hung heavy in the air. The emperor did not look their way. His attention remained fixed on Yang Guifei. But the court heard, and the women heard, and I heard. That single exchange was a duel, fought with silk and smiles. And though no blood was drawn, I sensed the wound would fester. Afterward, as music filled the hall and wine was poured, I sat quietly, hands folded, my eyes lowered. But inside my thoughts churned. I realized then that the palace was not only a place of beauty and song, it was a chessboard. Every robe a move, every jewel a declaration, every smile a stratagem. And though I was but a small piece, even the smallest could be swept into the game. That night, Yun found me staring at the lavender robe folded neatly on my bed. "You did well," she said softly. "You stayed silent." "Sometimes silence is the strongest shield," I nodded, though my heart ached. I wondered if silence would protect me forever, or if one day I too would be forced to wield words and gestures as weapons. The palace had always felt eternal to me, its walls immovable, its music unbroken, its splendor beyond decay. But then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, carried by eunuchs who passed too quickly, by ministers whose brows furrowed deeper with each audience. I heard the name Anlu Shan murmured in corridors, as if speaking it too loudly might summon storms. He was a general, I learned, favored once by the emperor himself, but now swollen with ambition, gathering armies at the borders. The air in the palace changed. Banquets grew quieter, the laughter thinner, like silk stretched too tight. Even the music seemed less certain, flutes trembling, drums too soft. Yang Guifei still shone beside the emperor, radiant as the moon, but I sometimes caught a shadow in her eyes, a flicker of unease she quickly concealed. One evening, as I walked through the garden, I saw Lady Lin and Lady Hua speaking in low tones near the peony bushes. Their faces were carefully composed, but their words betrayed them. If the general rises, who will protect us? The emperor listens only to her, and her kin grow fat with favor. I slowed my steps, pretending to admire the blossoms, but their whispers curled around me like smoke. For the first time, I felt the palace not as a sanctuary, but as a fragile cage, its beauty unable to shield us from the storms beyond. Soon, rumors thickened like storm clouds. Soldiers restless at the borders, merchants whispering of taxes too heavy, villages abandoned, fires in distant provinces. And through it all, the emperor clung ever more fiercely to Yang Guifei, as if her beauty could banish the tide of unrest. I remember one night vividly. The great drums upon the city walls thundered in the distance, a warning carried on the wind. From my chamber, I heard them, deep and foreboding, each beat like a fist striking the earth. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound seeped into my bones. Yun found me trembling and whispered, "The army of Anlushan has begun to march." Fear settled upon the palace like winter frost. The courtyards emptied earlier, the lanterns burned lower, the concubines gathered in anxious knots, their whispers sharp and hurried. Some wept silently, clutching their jewels as if they could shield them. Others boasted too loudly of the emperor's power, their voices brittle, betraying their doubt. I moved among them like a ghost, my heart heavy. For all our silks and perfumes, we were as powerless as children in a storm. And yet, even in fear, the rituals of the palace continued. We dressed, we bowed, we sang, we smiled. The emperor still held court, though his eyes seemed clouded with weariness. Yang Guifei still danced, her sleeves trailing like clouds, though I thought I saw her lips tremble when she thought herself unseen. The palace was still beautiful, but beneath the beauty, sorrow grew. We all felt it, the slow crumbling of something too grand to last. The palace, once a place of endless song, now carried a hollow echo. Even the laughter of the concubines had grown brittle, like porcelain cups that could shatter at the lightest touch. At dawn, instead of waking to the bright notes of birds and the soft plucking of the zither, I woke to silence. Yun whispered as she dressed me that the musicians had been dismissed for the day. "The ministers convene without pause," she murmured, her hands trembling as she fastened my robe. The emperor does not sleep. Shadows walk beside him. In the courtyards, eunuchs moved swiftly, their silk shoes tapping against the flagstones with urgent rhythm. They carried scrolls, seals, and tablets, marked with hurried ink. I saw one stumble and nearly fall, his pale face flushed not from clumsiness, but from fear. Among the women, anxiety became a second skin. In the baths, Where once steam rose with laughter and gossip, now silence reigned. A few whispered while combing their hair, their voices carrying across the water. And Lushan commands more soldiers than the emperor now. Some say he calls himself heaven's chosen. Another answered, her words sharp as a blade, "Do not speak his name." It is ill luck they lowered their voices, but I caught the quick glances, the trembling hands that betrayed them. Yang Guifei herself remained luminous, but even her radiance could not disguise the unease. During one banquet, she raised her jade cup in a toast, her smile serene. Yet I noticed how tightly she held it, her knuckles white against the green stone. When the emperor leaned close, whispering words I could not hear, she nodded, but her eyes flickered toward the hall's great doors, as if she half expected them to burst open at any moment. Then came the night when the drums thundered. I had been drifting toward uneasy sleep when the first low boom rolled through the palace. It was distant but powerful, shaking the lacquered screens in my chamber. Another followed, then another, steady as a heartbeat. Yun rushed in, her face pale. "The city walls," she breathed. "They sound the alarm." We hurried to the veranda, and I saw other concubines peering out from their windows, their hair loose, their faces unpainted, stripped of all the armor of beauty. The night sky was clear, the moon full, but the air itself seemed heavy, pressing against our chests. From beyond the palace walls came faint cries, shouts, the clatter of hooves, the clash of steel carried faintly on the wind. The drums continued, a relentless dirge. Some concubines began to weep quietly, others whispered prayers. Lady Lin clasped her rosary of jade beads so tightly they left marks upon her fingers. Lady Hua, who had once laughed at my simplicity, now bit her lip until it bled. We were gathered soon after by the eunuchs, who urged us back into our quarters. "The emperor will decide," they repeated, their voices flat, though their eyes betrayed their panic. "The emperor will protect you." But even as they spoke, I saw the fear they could not hide. That night, I could not sleep. Every creak of wood, every cry of an owl felt like an omen. I sat by the window, staring at the moon, whispering once more to Chang'e. But this time, my words trembled. How do I endure, goddess, when the earth itself quakes beneath me? How do I hold my breath when the air is filled with smoke? The next morning, the palace was cloaked in an unnatural hush. News spread in fragments, each more terrifying than the last. Cities fallen, soldiers defected, entire provinces lost to fire. The emperor had retreated deeper into the inner halls with Yang Guifei, surrounded by ministers who argued until their voices broke. Some concubines fainted from fear, others grew pale and silent as stone. I walked the garden paths, and for the first time, no birds sang among the willows. The lotus pond, usually a mirror of the sky, was dull and clouded. Even the air seemed bereft of fragrance, as if the blossoms themselves mourned. The palace that had once seemed eternal now felt fragile, like a painted lantern in the wind. Its light still glowing, but its paper walls ready to tear at the first storm. And we all knew. The storm had already arrived. We left Chang'an in haste, as though the city itself had become a burning cage. The golden roofs that once caught the sun now glimmered faintly behind us, veiled in smoke and dust. Our procession wound like a wounded serpent along the mountain roads, horses snorting, banners torn by the wind. the sound of weeping women mingling with the clatter of carts. I sat in a jolting carriage, clutching the edge of the seat as the wheels struck stones. Around me, the other concubines whispered prayers, their painted faces streaked with sweat and tears. Yun pressed close beside me, her hand steady on mine, though her eyes betrayed the same fear that gripped us all. The world we had known, its music, its banquets, its shimmering lanterns, was gone. In its place remained only the dust of the road and the pounding of our hearts. At the head of the procession rode the emperor. His robes were travel-stained, his face hollow with sleeplessness. Yet still, he stayed close to Yang Guifei, as though her presence alone could anchor him to hope. She rode in a litter, draped with torn silk, her beauty dimmed not by time, but by sorrow. Even in the chaos, she remained luminous, her hair loosened by the wind, her eyes shadowed by fear, yet still clear as dark pools. I saw how he looked at her, clinging to her as if she were the last light in a darkening world. But whispers poisoned the air. Among the soldiers trudging at the edges of the caravan, voices rose. It is her fault. She and her kin drained the empire's strength. If not for her, the emperor would see clearly. At first, the whispers were scattered, like sparks. But soon, they caught and grew into flames. One morning, as we halted in a valley for rest, the murmurs swelled into open cries. Soldiers slammed their spears against the earth, their faces twisted with rage and despair. "Death to the traitor!" they shouted. "The people starve while she feasts. The empire falls while she dances." The emperor resisted, his voice trembling as he declared his devotion. But the army would not move, would not march another step unless she was condemned. I saw the torment in his face. An emperor, the son of heaven, reduced to a man torn between love and survival. His hand trembled as he reached for her. Yang Guifei understood. I saw it in her eyes. Resignation, sorrow, and love so deep it carved her very soul. She bowed her head, her voice soft but unwavering. "If my death will bring peace to the empire, then let it be so." They led her to a quiet grove near the camp. The wind stirred the branches of the cypress trees, their shadows stretching long upon the ground. I could not follow, I dared not. But I stood at a distance, my breath caught in my throat, my nails digging into my palms until they drew blood. She walked with dignity, her silk robes trailing through the dust, her step steady though the soldier's eyes burned into her. No crown adorned her, no pearls gleamed upon her brow. Yet never had she seemed more regal. In that final walk, she was no longer merely the emperor's beloved. She was every tale of beauty and tragedy woven into one. And then, silence. When they returned, the grove stood empty. The soldiers were satisfied, their fury sated. The emperor wept, openly and without shame, his cries breaking the hearts of all who heard. He had lost his consort, his jewel, his moon, and we, concubines, servants, handmaidens, had lost the woman who had shone brighter than us all. That night, as we camped beneath the vast, indifferent stars, I stared at the sky until my eyes blurred. The moon rose slowly above the mountains, pale and sorrowful. I thought of Chang'e again, exiled in her cold palace, and I whispered, "Now she has joined you, goddess. The mortal moon has returned to the immortal one." Tears slipped down my cheeks, silent and unending. The court was broken, the empire in peril, and the most radiant flower of our age had been crushed beneath the weight of history. Beauty had fallen, and with it, a piece of the world's light. The days after her death passed like a dream half remembered, heavy with silence. Our caravan moved forward, but each step felt as though it dragged through shadows. The laughter of the court had vanished, replaced by the clatter of hooves and the dull creak of carts. Even the soldiers, once loud with rage, now marched in grim silence, their anger spent, their eyes hollow. Among the concubines, grief became a second skin. Some wept openly, clutching their robes until their knuckles whitened. Others stared blankly into the distance, as if their spirits had fled their bodies. For me, sorrow came in waves. First disbelief, then aching emptiness, then sudden bursts of tears that left me breathless. I could not reconcile the memory of her radiant smile with the knowledge that it was gone forever. At night, I lay awake beneath the unfamiliar sky, the stars cold and unyielding. The moon rose each evening, pale and distant, and I could not help but see her there. Yang Guifei had always been compared to the moon, luminous, untouchable, beloved. Now, in death, she seemed to have joined Chang'e, another immortal exile. I whispered to the goddess, "Do not leave her alone. Let her dance beside you in your silver halls. Let her beauty endure where cruelty cannot reach." Stories began to spread among us, as stories always do when hearts cannot bear silence. Some said that in death she ascended to the heavens, her spirit carried on the wings of phoenixes. Others swore that her ghost walked beside the emperor at night, her perfume lingering in the air, her voice murmuring like a forgotten song. A maid claimed she had dreamed of Yang Guifei, standing beneath a flowering tree, her robe shining like dawn, whispering, "I am not gone, only transformed." Even the emperor, broken and hollow, could not let her memory fade. Poets were commanded to write of her, verses inked with tears. The greatest among them compared her to a flower too radiant for earth, uprooted by fate, yet destined to bloom forever in legend. Their words echoed through the camps, and I listened, my chest tight, knowing they spoke truth. Her story would not die with her body. In the stillness of one night, I returned to my old ritual. I sat alone by a stream, its waters glimmering with moonlight, and whispered into the air. She was mortal, yet she became immortal. She was ours, yet now she belongs to all time. If the gods weave history into tales, then hers will shine brightest. The water carried my words away, rippling toward the horizon. I imagined them reaching her, wherever she had gone. And slowly, amidst grief, I began to understand. Beauty, love, sorrow, all were threads in the great tapestry of legend. Yang Guifei had been a woman of flesh and blood, fragile as any of us. Yet she had become something more. Her fall was not the end. It was the beginning of her immortality in memory. And I, a humble concubine, a shadow in her light, had borne witness. My whispers would join the countless voices that would keep her alive, not in the palace of men, but in the eternal palace of story. The palace I once entered with trembling awe now lives only in memory. Its marble halls, its jeweled gardens, its lanterns burning like captured stars, all have dissolved into the mist of time. What remains are fragments, the echo of laughter, the rustle of silk in moonlit courtyards, the haunting strains of music that once rose to touch the heavens. I remember the day I first passed through the vermilion gates, my heart pounding, my eyes wide with wonder. I was a girl then, uncertain and small, a sparrow among phoenixes. I remember the lady, Yang Guifei, whose beauty outshone all else, whose presence lit the palace like the moon. And I remember the shadows that grew, the whispers of discontent, the storm that swept her away and left us adrift. Now, when I think of her, I no longer see only her fall. I see her smile as she paused to speak my name. I see her sleeves trailing like clouds as she danced, her laughter mingling with music, her fragrance filling the halls. She is not gone. She has become legend, woven into the fabric of poetry, immortalized in song, shining forever in the moon's silver glow. As for me, I remain a voice in the margins, one among countless women who walked these corridors unseen. History may not remember my name, but I have lived, I have witnessed, I have whispered my truth to the moon. And perhaps that is enough. For in the quiet of night, I feel the presence of all who came before me. The concubines, the maidens, the forgotten souls. We are threads in the same tapestry, unseen but unbroken, our voices carried on the wind. Sometimes, in dreams, I walk once more through the gardens of Chang'an. The lotus pond is still. The lanterns glow. The air is rich with jasmine. I see the lady standing by the water, her reflection rippling in the moonlight. She turns to me, smiling, her face serene. And then she drifts away, a vision dissolving into silver mist. When I wake, the world is quiet. The moon lingers above, patient and eternal, as though listening. And I whisper into its light, remember us. Remember the women whose names are lost. Remember the beauty, the sorrow, the fleeting light of our days. Carry our stories into eternity. And with that whisper, I let the silence embrace me. The tale is told, the lanterns extinguished, the music faded into the night. Yet somewhere, in legend and in memory, we endure. And so the story comes to its end. A tale of beauty, love, sorrow, and legend. Echoes that still linger beneath the moonlit skies of China. If you enjoyed this journey, let us know where in the world you are listening from. What legends or histories would you like to hear next? Until then, may peace and dreams be with you, wherever you are.